Hey loves, it's Britt, and in this video I'm talking about Mercury square or opposite to Saturn in Synastry. So this aspect can be very difficult, especially on the Mercury person who can feel that the Saturn person emphasizes all the qualities of Saturn that are perceived as negative. They can seem cold, critical, even demeaning to the Mercury person's ideas. They can even straight up take issue with the way that the Mercury person communicates things, conveys things. They can have a very diminishing effect on the mental confidence and capacity of the Mercury person. Now, that's not going to be the case in every relationship with these aspects, because sometimes the Saturn person has a less critical Saturn. Then, like, you have to look at the signs that this is taking place in. But there is a constant theme of having very different beliefs, coming from different backgrounds, different understandings about life, and there can be a lot of judgment. And you know what? It's not just the Saturn person that is judging. The Mercury person also judges the Saturn person as, you know, um, not intelligent, or just not, they just don't understand things that the Mercury person mentally understands. You could sometimes see with this that the Mercury person is in fact more intelligent or more book smart in some way, and the Saturn person's demeaning energy towards the Mercury person is actually coming from an insecurity that they actually don't understand where the Mercury person is coming from. Okay, so Saturn can be a very insecure part of us. And, when we're projecting it onto someone, we're not, as aware in our own Saturn energy. We can actually, yeah, be very critical, or come at the Mercury person like as if they're stupid, when in fact, it really is that their intelligence or their wit or their understanding of certain things are just so outside of our life experience and reach that it makes us feel insecure. So there could be a bit of that going on. The opposition aspect, you're going to see the direct opposition of the ideas of the upbringings. In some cases, you could see that the way that the Mercury person was raised, their ideas, their, school of thought that was, what they were brought up in their early life is like exactly opposite to the way the Saturn person was brought up. And there can be a lot of misunderstandings because of this. Now, the square, they could have maybe some similarities and some differences in upbringing. It's more of a just constant tension, where usually the Saturn person is spending a lot of time questioning the Mercury person, and the Mercury person is spending a lot more time like proving themselves or trying to prove themselves. When we see the square, the Mercury person and sometimes the Saturn person are both working through father issues with this one. So they could have both had a very strict father figure who, put down their ideas or told them, the classic like old parent saying, right? Kids are seen and not heard. That's how the Mercury person can feel with this aspect, is that the Saturn person feels like the parent that's saying kids are seen and not heard. So basically, Mercury, just shut up because you don't know what you're talking about. The opposition is probably less difficult, but at the same time more difficult. It's different. Like, the square is a constant feeling of challenging each other mentally, but the opposition, we're just so opposite, and we're so like balancing that polarity that it might actually be more difficult, but there's also a more compatibility or more potential for growth. Whereas the square, there's more potential to just always be disagreeing. Okay, so both can be handled, both can be resolved, but this is something like if you're seeing this in a synastry chart, or if you're seeing this with your clients that you're working with, you're an astrologer, this is something that needs to be mentioned, because it's one of these aspects that can produce such a feeling of coldness or alienation from each other. Like, you can't speak, you can't be yourself, you can't be authentic. Mercury is such an authentic, inquisitive part of us. And when we feel someone's heavy Saturn squaring or opposing our Mercury, it can be so restrictive and it can feel so depressing. It can actually make both people depressed, without having awareness of this going on, without the consciousness, like knowing this is happening. If you know that it's happening, you can be aware of it, and you can know, what you're learning. And the Mercury person has to understand where the Saturn person is coming from. They might not necessarily mean to be this mean parental figure to them. It's just that when the Mercury person talks and the Mercury person shares ideas, it brings up fear in them. It brings up insecurity. It makes them get all reactive in their Saturn and all judgy, and they're not necessarily meaning to be so demeaning or hurtful, but they do need to have a talk with the Saturn and say, you know what, when you say things like this, it hurts me. Or when you act like that, it makes me feel like my ideas don't matter. And then the Saturn person can just be honest with Mercury too, and say, look, sometimes when you communicate about things, it makes me think like you don't really understand where I'm coming from. You don't really understand my wisdom, my lessons, my karma that I've gone through, and that's why I react like that, and I'm sorry. And they can have a lot of that going on, a lot of hurting each other mentally and then apologizing for it. And I guess if there's other aspects that are harmonious, some trines or sextiles to this hard aspect, it's going to be easier. But it's definitely one that requires more communication, not less, because the instinct with this one is that Mercury wants to shut down and not talk to Saturn anymore. And Saturn feels like Mercury is just insane or irresponsible or childish, and their instinct is to judge. And they need to really take a look at their own Saturn and try to, with all of their might, bring out the positive qualities of that sign, okay? Because it's likely the Mercury person brings out the negative qualities in their Saturn. So it's important to look at this aspect and kind of like counsel yourself if you have this in your synastry, because it's one of the tougher ones, and it's one of the ones that can be especially disheartening or depressing. Okay, on the positive side though, the Saturn person can really help the Mercury person ground ideas that maybe were not fully formed yet. The Saturn person can bring formation to these more out there ideas that the Mercury person has. So Mercury talks a lot and doesn't always follow through. As a generalization, Mercury, can be more like Gemini, jack of all trades, master of none. The Saturn person's influence can help them pick one thing and go with it and ground it all the way into reality, and potentially even end up getting some sort of concrete success from it on a good day. So that is the benefit. And then the Mercury person can also, through their inquisitiveness and their curiosity, if they don't shut this down, they can help the Saturn person free up their energy and free up their fears and their karma, and really develop more perspective on the karmic issues in their life. And so it can end up being really helpful for both people. And I think that's the ultimate purpose. The Saturn person needs to let the Mercury person be free in their ideas, and recognize that even if the Mercury person believes some things that feel threatening to them, they don't need to try to change them or overpower them or criticize them or judge them. They're actually meant to, with these aspects, have different beliefs, and maybe the ultimate lesson is to have respect for those different beliefs in each other, because you're just coming from a different place. You've had different experiences that have led you to these different understandings, and the antidote is understanding and just being okay with disagreeing on some things, because you will with this aspect. And Saturn needs to let Mercury be free to think what they want and speak the way they want, and Mercury needs to know that Saturn is well-meaning. And yeah, that is my advice to you guys if you have this aspect. I'd love to know your experience of it. Was it like this? Was it not like this? Let me know in the comments, you guys. And thank you so much for watching. We'll talk soon. Bye.